This topic is so important that we at the IB feel really strongly around pre-competitive alignment on measurement and identifying the most effective way towards net zero. Anyone who's been watching the news over the last few days is seeing the frequency of climate events and the horrific events in Morocco and Libya overnight, that almost things are happening so frequently that we're not even capturing them in the news cycle. So every little part that we do is going to make a difference to the rest of the planet. So we thought this session was going to be the most important one to lead with. We believe that the framework that has been established by AdNet Zero is a great way at looking at how the industry can approach changes in market, necessary changes in market. For this session, we're going to primarily be focused on action point 3, so around the transactional planning, buying, trading side of things. But it's important to look at all 5 action points in the mix. There's a lot of work being done across the industry, particularly by the ACCC and the AANA on areas around greenwashing. So making sure brands are responsible with their messaging, but also encouraging good messaging. So you're not greenwashing or green hushing. So some big codes coming out that all marketers will need to be across for that. But as I said today, we're going to focus on the day-to-day stuff that we're all doing and how we can make a change. One great thing about this topic and its importance is the level of true collaboration. I know we throw that word around a lot, but it does feel like it has really garnered different industry bodies, different sectors to try and solve for problems. So in the US, you can see a variety of different players, including IB Tech Lab, coming together to look for solutions. Locally, we're working very closely with the other industry bodies, in particular MFA and AANA, as well as the other channels, to look at local approaches that needed to be added on top of any global approaches. So watch this space, but the level of discussion and engagement and initiatives is really robust. We've got history of doing collaborative work in Australia. We are a market that's a great size to be able to know most people, bring everyone together and get alignment there. This year, there was a great paper which I would recommend everyone downloading. We will share a whole lot of links and resources after the event that you can all, we don't want to distract you too much during the day. But through WFA, so the Worldwide Federation of Advertisers, and GARM, the Global Alliance of Responsible Media, sorry for all the acronyms, coming together to really look at action points that can help reduce emissions in the media, not just digital, but the media industry. So there's some points there which we'll talk to. IB Tech Lab and IAB Australia have both been putting out a lot of really practical advice and really tangible advice of, particularly in the programmatic ecosystem, how we can make a huge difference. So lots of resources there and a lot of work's being done. The one good thing, or one of the good things around a lot of the approaches to carbon reduction is how aligned they are with good practice. So it's not like we're often going against other recommendations in market. So we're seeing things that are just, good ways of operating in the ecosystem, reducing wastage, etc. And we'll get these guys to talk some of the details. But what I'm loving is we're starting to go beyond, I guess, rhetoric to actual examples. There was a recent research report that came out from a collaborative approach. So Publica, Index Exchange, Trade Desk, and Scope 3, looking at what the most recent OpenRTB standards, OpenRTB 2.6, can do to reduce carbon emissions in the CTV environment. And in their test, by using the latest standards, it reduced the impact by 84%. So incredibly strong, powerful things by using open standards that don't, really have a major downside for any players in the market. Enough from me. Welcome, guys. Thank you for sitting through that. Let's go through firstly, let's chat about what you guys are all doing as individual companies. and then we might sort of come back to, as an industry, what the best approach is. And we've been back and forth, this group, over the last few days, trying to get some really key takeaways for everyone. So at the end, we are going to have some agreed, aligned, let's get on and do things. So, but first, let's chat to Roz. Are you able to give us an overview, and I know you're leading sustainability for media brands locally, which is amazing, of your current, I guess, approach locally and globally?
Yep, sure. It's on.
Yeah.
So our role as media agency and media buyers is really to steward our client budgets and help them navigate the future world of sustainability. Our role as media agencies also puts us really, or as a media collective, puts us at that kind of intersection between business and society, which then gives us a real kind of influence and therefore responsibility to work on all sorts of ways to create really radical change. So we have kind of currently 3 tenets towards, that contribute to our approach. Firstly, it's around, as you say, decarbonising our media supply chain. Secondly, how we can work to defund climate misinformation. And then thirdly, that idea of a radical collaboration so that we're running at these things, because I think we can all acknowledge that we are in the midst of a climate emergency, and how we can move forward at speed to create a pretty radical transformation of the way that we're measuring, understanding and reducing what we're doing. So we've got a number of pieces of work that sit underneath that, which I might just go through quickly. Firstly, we have a Media Responsibility Index, which is a kind of audit to establish and understand the baseline of industry performance in all areas of ESG, but I guess today particularly to talk about sustainability. The point of that is to help our clients understand and be able to reprioritise their media spend, but also as a tool to help the industry understand what the baseline is, what the benchmarks are, look to global media vendors and learn together how we can, to work to improve. So we have that Media Responsibility Index as a kind of overriding piece. We work, as most people do, with a carbon calculator. There's all sorts that are wrong with carbon calculators, not going to say that they're perfect, but what they do is help us quantify at channel level where our emissions are going to different channels. It also helps us bring in the idea of having a carbon budget that sits alongside a media budget, and then really reframe our idea of where wastage is happening in different channels. On a more granular level, we work with Scope 3 and other data and tech partners to really quantify at impression level where there is wastage or where we're spending with higher emitting sites, which then helps us to curate those green media or lower emitting sites that we can focus our client expenditure on. And then alongside that, we've run a couple of really interesting pieces of research, so Magna Media Trials, to create that connection between attention, for example, and sustainability, with the idea that, I guess in the old days, if you felt that there are 1,000 impressions that you didn't pay for, there's no impact on your media budget. But of course that does have an impact on the planet, and as we kind of work together to establish different ways of measuring and different ways of quantifying that wastage, that's certainly a direction that we're headed.
That's good. I mean, talking about that viewability issue earlier on, that was very much the idea of we're not
trying not to
paying
bring
for
up
it.
viewability again.
Fantastic. And are you seeing, I guess, don't sort of have to go in great detail, but all the work that you're doing, is it changing are you changing spend and are you seeing a reduction?
Look, I think at this point, it's really getting people to. I mean, I think that idea of the carbon budget is really interesting. So where we have it on media plans alongside media budget, and I think digital is a good example of, because it's not tangible in the way that, if you print a bunch of newspapers, you can see the stack of them. If you print some vinyl skins for out of home, there's probably been a greater awareness of that kind of wastage. I think for digital, some of that idea that there is genuine emissions, genuine damage being done, then I think that is important.
Awesome. Jordan.
Yes.
What's going on at 9?
Yeah, I mean, I think like media brands, we're in our journey. We're not at the start of it anymore, but we are in our journey. We've been blessed to have Michelle, who's here in the audience, as our lead for sustainability, and she's come from an experience in Europe. So that's given us a nice little head start in a lot of ways, like in philosophy and things like that. Really what we've been focused on in the here and now is around the measurement and the curation of the vendors that we're using. That's been super important. So we've been really focused on sort of measuring that scope 1 and 2 and 3, so that we understand sort of like our carbon output before we get to sort of to make sure that we're able to inform in the best way. And I think that that's really important for a big publisher like us, Australia's media company. We need to be in a position where we understand our footprint, and then we can help all of our partners as best as we can. I think we're also sort of very focused on a quality metric, like with our impressions, and we really encourage brands and sort of, I know that it's a bit of a renaissance for that in a lot of the agencies right now. MFA is really sort of being put under the spotlight that it should.
And I'll just pick you up on that, because it is tricky with that acronym in Australia, where MFA also stands for the Media Federation of Australia.
I thought that's what we were talking about. No, that's a joke. That's totally a joke. It's made for advertising, and they are the sites that you're like, why am I on cheeseburger.com? And then it's like, okay, you've scraped that out of Reddit. Okay, cool. And worse. And so, I think that that is only going to explode with AI and sort of the generation of the content and things like that. So, as a premium publisher with professionally generated content, we're always going to be focused on that. And we think that buyers and agencies and the like should be as well. The other major thing that we're focused on is collaboration. We see this as, it's not something for competition. It's not an us versus 7. If you want to talk about programming, we can do that all day. But in terms of sustainability, we're sort of all in this together, and we've got to head in the right direction. We're already subscribing to that. Michelle's been away. I'm speaking on Michelle's behalf here. Michelle's been away and spoken to other publishers internationally. That's put us onto vendors with, methodologies that are, working with the University of Bristol and Sky and things like that. So, it's really sort of important on that quality metric and collaboration and measurement.
Yeah, fantastic. And for those who don't know, we do have a working group for sustainability. So any companies that are sort of within the IB and not involved, please get involved and add to that knowledge bank as well. Adele, so the programmatic ecosystem has been, I guess, under a lot of scrutiny in terms of, wastage, auctions. How's Index leaning into change here?
Yeah, I think I'll touch on the fact that programmatic is in focus. I think digital as a whole has come into focus, and then programmatic is a subset of that. Due to the computational power that's required to host the auctions and to serve the ads that occur as a result of effectively the ecosystem that we built. This isn't really new, but it has obviously exploded in the last couple of years as header bidding adoption has really, driven growth. From Index's perspective, we take it, I guess there's kind of two sides. There's the what are we doing? What actions are we taking as a company to hold ourselves to account? So things like our offices where we have our own office space. We use a number of WeWorks, but those are out of the question at the moment. We focus on, LEAD is the sustainability measure for, eco-friendly office environments. Our data centres as another core focus, so looking at driving towards green energy there. 90% of our global data centres are now 100% on green energy at the moment. So that's one step we're taking forward. Then from our employees' perspective, we're looking at how we can change some of the policies to make it a little bit more operational in terms of the steps we can take. So things like if we're travelling, we're looking for green options in, flights or transport, can we take a train instead of a cab and things like that. So we're encouraging and leaning in to help our staff navigate that as we continue to grow. But then as we work with partners in the ecosystem, I'd say we're looking at it on two sides or two layers, I think, of the journey that Jordan mentioned. Everyone is at different stages. Some are very early, some are quite well advanced in their understanding and of measurement and of the tools that can be used. And so the first phase is that educate and measure. So we help partners understand what are the tools, what are the processes that they can employ that can help them navigate that measurement assessment. Can it be something like the AdNet Zero calculator that they can lean on? Can it be other tools and methodologies that exist out there? I don't think, we've all agreed that there isn't one particular one that we're all hanging our hat on at the moment, but understanding the differences and the nuances between those will help you build a better understanding of what you need to use going forward. The measure piece is just, responding to queries. We get a number of inbound, I would say not formal RFIs, but queries around like how do we as a business, support green, like the move towards green in totality. And so we're in a process now where we're doing that quite frequently and providing information back that then informs business strategies for our partners. The second phase of it is what I'm deeming is like refine and optimize. So working with our partners to understand what are the tools that they can take action with right now. Things like, Gay, you mentioned it before, the open RTB specs, leaning into advancements around, tech standards, working to understand supply path optimization and demand path optimization, acronyms that have been around for a number of years but are becoming more and more important as we go down that path. And even things like utilising ads.txt and seller.json, those industry standards that exist out there, they're actually a way that can help you refine your media buying strategies or how you're exposing your inventory to ensure that it is correctly represented. So that in general, there's a lot of pieces that we're working on from both our own business and getting our house in order, but also, we are seeing ourselves playing a critical part in helping every other business that we work with navigate this as it evolves, because it will change. There'll be more pieces that we need to consider, but I think, we're there and we're here to help, and we're trying to just use the knowledge that we have gleaned through our operations in the last few years to really help our partners move through this.
Talking of gleaning information, Ros, I know most of the agency groups have done really big sort of local market sweeps of what's going on. I know there's a lot of information in there, but overall, are you seeing an uptick in the responses and the quality of how people are thinking about it, or your partners, when you're gathering all that information?
Yeah, there certainly has been. I think when we first started, there were many media organisations without a sustainability lead or without anyone kind of central point responsible for, aggregating the information at least.
Yeah.
I think media in Australia has changed quickly over the last year or two. I think, society in general in Australia has changed very quickly in the last year or two.
Yeah, great.
So I think, the time... And I know that we've done Media Responsibility Index, other agencies have done similar kind of sweeps. At this point, we're gathering what is fairly confidential information from our media partners, so we don't have the opportunity to kind of course, share it out. But as ESG reporting becomes mandatory, we will also need, as a corporate Australia, rather than just media, to be much better at reporting, to find the standards, to find the measurement that we will then go on to to share and collaborate with internally or as a industry, as well as then, reporting through to, the regulators, which will be coming very quickly.
Yeah, and I guess there's a lot we can learn from Europe in that regard, who are often leading the way in that sort of approach.
Yeah.
So I guess coming to, and Adele, you sort of started this industry discussion. I'm going to bring up the slide, the much worked on slide that we've been back and forth on and wordsmithing, which has been a great exercise to work out what's important. I think one thing that came through really strongly from this group in terms of, I guess, empowering everyone in the industry was understanding your own company's position. So even if you're not the sustainability lead, if you're not a product builder, if you're not, changing side of things, understanding what's already there. And I think even just having those questions internally from staff members is going to help change organisations.
Well, I think as well as just understanding, it's also agitating because there's no one person that is the owner of all things sustainability. The information, the knowledge, the kind of desire for action can come from anyone and everyone. So I do think there is I should have said that when we were having this debate earlier, but it's not just understanding, it's pushing to understand and pushing to create change within your company as well.
Awesome.
I think
that also.
Go.
I think that also extends to with your partners. Like it's. I think you should feel very licensed to ask your company what the policy is. And I think every company, obviously the ESG reporting is coming through, but should understand it's scope 1 and 2 and 3. But but I think you should feel like everybody in this room works with partners. I think you should feel licensed to ask them sort of where they are on their journey. Like we've started asking all of the SSPs and all of the vendors, and you're sort of getting, again, it's a journey, and it's not sort of something where you go like, oh, that wasn't a perfect answer. You're like, okay, like you're thinking about it. That somebody's brought that up to the US. That that's happened, like it's having some sort of push through. It's exactly sort of what happened with the agencies and with the publishers locally. It's sort of like, okay, first time you're doing that, you are doing it for the first time, but that's absolutely okay. Like it's a journey, it's an industry in its nascence. Like it's an understanding that we're all sort of collectively coming to. And I think everyone asking that question immediately, that's something that you can do today, internally and externally.
I mean, some people talk about those 3 C's of collaboration, creativity and cooperation, which I think are really essential for this, and how we all come together from, with some humility as well, because no one's got a perfect solution for any of these things. So how we talk about what we know and what we don't know, what we're measuring, what we think we're measuring but maybe not sure. And then as the most creative industry on the planet, how we get together to, solve for some of these issues.
It's exciting.
You haven't even built the slide yet.
We're on the general side of things. So we've tried to pull together the top 5 points for buyers and sellers, and a lot of the discussion has sort of naturally happened throughout this. Ros, I might just, again, start with you from a buyer's point of view. Sort of the 5 points that we've landed on, are the right ones? What are you most passionate about?
Look, I think, I agree with all of those points. I don't know if we have the time to even be looking at things sequentially. I think now is the time to be running at these problems. As I say, being aware that, I think measurement is critical, because I think for that collaboration and cooperation is really underpinned by trust. And I think if we don't have clear and consistent measurement, the trust piece can be difficult.
Yeah.
But, as I say, acknowledging that, the measurement, there's lots of measurement around, but it might be measuring this particular set of, from A to B.
If anyone knows how hard measurement is, it's this graph.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think working with what we've got rather than waiting for it to be perfect is really essential. And then being transparent about what we've got and thinking about how we can measure, what we're not able to see perhaps right now. But I think once we've got, once we're starting to measure properly, to quantify what we're doing, then it makes it much easier for us to focus on reducing, optimising, buying less, as my T-shirt says,
Yay.
buying less and essentially, reducing our emissions that way.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's interesting how similar the buy and sell side. I mean, they're just flips, right? Del, from the seller side, is there anything you want to?
Yeah, I think the excuse me, the main intention of this slide is to call out that there are small steps that are meaningful that you can take right now. I think when I started my journey into the world of sustainability, I felt it was very akin to when I started recycling at home. Just the notion of having to take off the milk bottle cap and recycle that, or like bin that and, recycle the carton. It was like, does this really matter? Is one cap in the wrong place going to mean anything? But then when you start to really understand like what you can influence as a single person, the more of us individuals collectively doing a thing on either the buy or the sell side, or together in collaboration with your partners, we'll all start to move the industry forward and we'll get to a better place very quickly. I think my main sort of takeaway is like, don't fear this. We should all lean in, embrace it. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. I know I've asked a plethora of very silly ones in my journey, but we wanted to just make sure that there was something tangible that everyone could walk away from today going, great, I can start my journey, I can help my business, I can help my industry, I can help my friends and my family. Like that was for me the passion behind this slide.
No, I think it's great. So
yeah.
Click away.
Yeah.
Now, we've started a little late, but we might have time for one or two questions. Is there anyone on the floor? We might do one from the floor and one from Slido. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to ask this fabulous panel anything? You know you do.
No, we do have a hello. We do have a couple on Slido. One actually for all of you, but also yourself, Gay. In terms of the sort of incorporation or management of this topic, some of us look back on some of the pains we experienced with viewability. Well, that took a while to settle down. And there is a question on there which I think is interesting in terms of, are we seeing that as a measurement metric? And I know we've talked about attention and all the rest of it, but is that starting to come back into focus with regards to sustainability? Is there a shift towards maybe higher levels of viewability as a result?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's getting rid of wastage. So, and there's a myriad of different things. We talked about MFAs, viewability, meaningful attention. So I think they can all come together. It's just the tricky thing actually knowing how to measure that in the right way, particularly for, digital, there's just so many different types of inventory. Like, how do we do it in a way that's fair and equal? One thing that is pleasing, so obviously there's a lot of calculators out there. Ad Net Zero have worked on Ad Green, which is the production calculator, which seems to be a bit easier to sort of, it's a bit more binary what's sort of counted. So that's an industry calculator, so anyone who's working sort of on the creative or the production side. But Ad Net Zero is also working on an industry calculator. So there will be some, I guess, global thinking that pulls away from some of the individual calculators that might not be as transparent. The intent is for a lot of that work to be open source that can then go into, we know innovation will happen through commercial organisations, so being able to power other companies with agreed agnostic standards, which is exactly what the IAB does, has done forever, going back to what a banner ad should look like. So I'm looking forward to some of those agreed standards coming through. But yeah, let's get rid of stuff that's not seen or used or that's a waste of time. All right. Thank you all.